Hello, 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 and welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D, which is brought to you by EN World Live. I am your host, Jessica, and if you are live watching with us right now, you'll notice I have not one, not two, but three guests here from Sandy Pug Games. Thank you so much, folks, for coming to join us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
of course. So I will go through and introduce you all individually because you all have interesting backgrounds in TTRPGs to talk and share about and all the different things you do at Sandy Pug Games. But this week we are talking about Monster Care Squad. If you are watching live, please do get involved in the chat. Ask any questions. Hello, great to have you here. Thanks for joining us. And if you're listening to the podcast, any links to things we talk about will be in the show notes for you to listen to. So before we get into it and talk about Monster Care Squad, a game I'm very excited to be learning more about. Let's talk a little bit about you at Sandy Pug Games and what you do. So, Jan, shall we start with you?
Sure.
What do you do at Sandy Pug Games?
I do a little of everything, actually. I guess I'm the red mage of the group. Actually, honestly, a lot of us do a little of everything. Kind of the beauty of a small team that's co-op is we all, we pull our weight where we can, and sometimes where we can't as well. But primarily I'm a writer on the team. I do a little bit of graphics here and there, but primarily I'd say I'm a writer on the team. And I guess I do a lot of the marketing as well. I just kind of forget about that.
Yeah. So you just do kind of a little bit of everything, as every indie TTRPG publisher ever does. Awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
So Gabriel, also same question to you. What is it that you do at Sandy Pug Games, apart from a little bit of everything, obviously?
The main thing I do at Sandy Pug Games is the main thing I was invited to do, which is write. And one of my favorite things in tabletop role-playing games is those little prose interstitial bits and examples of play bits in games. So I was lucky enough to get invited way back when to do that on Americana, and I got to do it again on Monster Care Squad, as well as write and come up with some of the monsters.
Fantastic, which I'm so excited to dig in and talk about, because there is the weird and wonderful in this book. And also, JN, thank you for coming on. Same question to you. What is it you do at Sandy Pug Games?
Yeah, sure. So mainly at Sandy Pug, I do art. So I'm an illustrator, but kind of similar to everyone. Like, the cool thing about a co-op is we all kind of jump in on stuff with whatever we are feeling passionate about working on at the time. So, I don't really write for the co-op, but I love putting in ideas for things and then seeing everyone else kind of flesh that out whenever we're brainstorming stuff. I don't know, our Discord where we like talk through ideas is one of the funnest places ever, because just like the way that everybody's willing to dive deep into the most absurd ideas, and you start out with something that seems so like, we can never do this, and then half an hour later we're like, well, this is the core thing of the next game we're doing. So
amazing.
Yeah, so that's a lot of fun. And then getting to do other stuff besides just visual art. Jan as well, we both do music for whether it's like promo or Jan got to do a full album for Monster Care Squad, which is super sick.
Amazing
and beautiful. So
awesome. That's really cool. So it sounds like a really cool team of people I get to interview. It's so nice to have a team of people, because sometimes I have just one person, but I love seeing how publishing teams, because making TTRPGs is such a collaborative process a lot of the time. So I love having interviews with a team of people, because I get to see the dynamic and how it all works. So I'm super excited to have you all on. My next question is very nosy, and purely just because I like talking about games. I like talking about people's history and background with TTRPGs. So I generally ask, like, what was your first memory of playing a role-playing game, or some influentials, games you had as a player before you started working in the industry. So I'll start with Gabriel this time, because I'll go a different route round. So Gabriel, what was the first TTRPG you remember playing?
So Jay Dragon has this essay where she talks about how playing Pretend is the first RPG that you wind up doing. And I think I got into RPGs because I never really wanted to stop playing pretend. It's how I got into community theater as well. I think when I finally got into something where dice adjudicated for our playing pretend decisions, it was Dungeons and Dragons 3.5. But now that I've come to think about RPGs that way, it's honestly like, no, I never wanted to stop playing pretend, whether it was with stuffed animals or I was a big Bionicle fan, and I was constantly inviting friends over to play with those for hours at a time. And I gotta say, I don't think anything has hit the sweet spot that playing with Legos did.
So that tactile sort of game, fantastic. I do love that approach. Yeah, I think J Dragon's article on that was fantastic, talking about is playing pretend, because that's 100% how I feel. And I am also a theatre kid as well, got into it that way, so I'm glad to see I'm in good company here. JN, how about you?
So I think my first official game is kind of similar to Gabriel. I came in when I was in high school to DnD 3.0, and but even that, I played on weekends with friends, but I got into it mostly because I love the art in the books, and I was just like, I want to somehow live in this art, like if this game gives me an excuse to do that. And I pretty much spent most of the sessions just like flipping through pages and then figuring out how does this become the game, and that's honestly kind of what I approach a lot of games with now. I come into a lot of things art first, which is probably not a big surprise for an artist, but I guess that was the first thing.
It definitely shows in the game, I was saying, because Monster Care Squad is beautiful. It's a stunning book as well. So, and I think the art also captures the vibe and the feeling of the game really nicely as well. And so I think art is really important in TTRPGs because it introduces you to the mood and the tone of the game and can help create that. So I think it's really interesting that you bring that out.
Yeah, and I'll clarify too that I was not the main artist on Monster Care Squad. That was Leafy, who just did phenomenal job setting the tone for the book and really doing something just immediately unique and obvious as something belonging to that world. So
absolutely, yeah. Sorry, I wasn't trying to give you credit for it. And obviously you drew the whole book yourself. Sorry. So thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, just make sure that everybody.
So we don't get angry letters after the stream saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" But but Jan, also to bring the question back to you as well. So what was your entry to TTRPGs? When were you first starting playing?
I guess it depends. I think this counts, but people maybe disagree with me. My first TTRPG was Freeway Fighter by Ian Livingstone. It was like one of those old fighting fantasy books, legally distinct from Choose Your Own Adventure.
Of course, I wouldn't imply they were the same. No.
It was that. It was one of those books. I'm not 100% sure it was Freeway Fighter, but I think that was the one. Obviously you play these books alone, but I really had liked Choose Your Own Adventure books in the past. Yeah. These ones just went a little bit further, and they introduced like dice and inventory and armor and weapons and stuff like that. Yeah. And my mind just and it changed everything for me. I hacked those books constantly. I made them into my own games all the time. So I was like, this is cool, but what if it wasn't fighting? What if it was something cooler than fighting? And thus began my long history of trying to cram fishing into every game.
Well, it works in Stardew Valley, so why not other games?
I think that's such a rad call out, interactive fiction. That was huge for me too. I love those books. Whether it was Goosebumps, the legally distinct Choose Your Own Adventure books, or just I don't know, all that stuff. Yeah, for sure. Like that's sort of like the first intro to solo TTRPG play.
Mm-hmm.
Find Your Fate,
Definitely.
Indiana Jones was my first.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. If the watchers at home disagree with this game counting as a TTRPG, then my first actual TTRPG in a social setting was Shadowrun.
Oh, wow.
A
Okay.
dear
Yeah.
friend of mine, Trez_makes_art at Instagram, also a wonderful artist. They actually were my first GM and introduced me to TTRPGs proper through Shadowrun. I played a street samurai who put all of his points into bonsai. I was not very useful to the team, but I had a lot of fun spritzing my little plants all the time.
They're the best characters, though, where you just pick a character element and you run with it. You're like, they're not going to be useful, but they're an interesting person, and I want to know what their story is about.
Yeah.
So absolutely. And I think you're the first person that said Shadowrun is their first TTRPG as well. So an award for you on that.
Completely accidental. I had read D&D, but I'd never played it. I just friends had the books, and I'd be like, this is cool. I don't know what this is, but I like all the tables and stuff. Yeah. And then I later got to actually play some. I was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened.
Fantastic. So it sounds like you were all, growing up, it's sitting in your rooms playing the Choose Your Own Adventure games or legally distinct versions of that, it sounds like. So how did you become, how did Sandy Pug Games come about? How did you become a team of people working together to create games?
So Nem was and can definitely, she can talk more about that in the comments to this stream if you'd like, but Nem had been solo designing for a while now, and she brought me on board for a one-page sort of one-joke role-playing game called Orc Stabber, a game made by orcs for orcs.
Of course.
And that completed the $20 funding goal on Kickstarter because it had it was unscope creepable. It was one piece of paper that we would put in an envelope and mail to people. And I think we had a slightly lower tier where we ripped the piece of paper in half and then sent that to people. So it was perfect. It was the perfect way to figure out how to self-publish goods. And then there was Americana after that. And then Nem actually helped put together a different co-op, the San Gennaro co-op. I think they might be going by a different name right now. But they put together... through that, she put together the Role Player's Guide to Heists. And I think next she was like, all right, well, felt really good to have a big group of people. Let's do that again. And then the first, they're the Far Horizons co-op now. And then the first book that was really a full co-op book was Monster Care Squad. And to be clear, I don't think any of us had any idea how incredibly big it would be. It was meant to be sort of a smaller PDF, around 40 pages, but I don't know if you remember what the environment was like during the summer of 2020, but suddenly a lot of people were indoors.
Can't remember why, but yeah. I remember it being a thing vaguely.
Something happened to make that happen. And then simultaneously, and I don't know how discourse waves work on the internet. I know I look like a very online person, but I'm really not as online as all that. But I know the same conversations tend to happen over and over again, so I'm not going to pretend this is the first time. But there was a relatively big discussion on TTRPG Twitter about what you can do in these things. And we all love violence in our tabletop role-playing games, as evidenced by our past history with tabletop role-playing games and the swords that you can put in your hands and all that. But because people were suddenly asking questions about what different kind of things you could do, I think that got us curious about seeing how you could solve the problem or seeing what it would be like to not be one of those guys killing a monster, but more like Gecko from Mushishi, who's like wandering from village to village, and he's so cool, and no one's like, why doesn't Gecko have a sword? He's to be these wandering experts that go in and find a problem that's entirely localized to this interesting community of people who have a relationship with this creature. In the case of Mushishi, I think it was ghosts, but just sort of having a mystery on our hands where it was a different problem every time and a different solution to solve the problem.
Well, that segues us really nicely into talking about Monster Care Squad. So I'll stop grilling you about your personal experiences with TTRPGs and your careers and stuff, and let's talk about this game. So Jayan or Jan, I don't know if one of you two wants to take this, but what's like the pitch for Monster Care Squad? How do you introduce it to people that haven't heard of it before?
I don't know. Jan, do you want to take this one? Should I take it?
I'll let you or Gabriel take this one, since I wasn't in on the ground floor with Monster Care Squad.
Okay.
I usually pitch the game. I kind of just I almost lowball it, and I just say it's a game about being nice to monsters, I guess.
Nice.
Even though that's like an oversimplification of what it is. Yeah, I could. Sometimes I'll go a little bit more into depth about the setting and stuff like that. But for this game, I feel like the setting is really the Kinder Surprise toy inside. Okay. I don't want to give them those details because that's the toy they get to open and assemble when they get in there. And I think that the setting and like the world that Nem and crew have built is really the real toy in Monster Care Squad. Not to like say the mechanics and stuff aren't interesting. It's just like what I want people to come away from is just, I want them to leave and feel like they really were there for a bit, just a minute, I was there for a minute. And that's kind of how I pitch it. It's like a world where you will be able to jump in there and feel like you're part of like this wild universe, very Ghibli-esque, kind of, Secret of Mana-esque, maybe. All these like giant fantastic creatures. That's usually my pitch is, if you ever wanted to hang out with giant monsters and pet them, because here you can.
I think actually, most players want to do that. But yeah, Jan.
I was just going to say, actually, maybe I can give a little bit of perspective on what I think the pitch is, because since I actually came to Monster Care Squad later, the game had already had a super successful Kickstarter. And as a result of that, the co-op, and we can talk about this, maybe get more into it later, the co-op came up with this idea for a grant program with a lot of the money that, the co-op wasn't expecting to come in through this. And so I had my friend Lirio, who knew I was not super happy with what I was doing with commissions for things on DM's Guild and doing some other D&D products here and there, that it just like, I didn't feel like I was fitting in with that at the time. Gave me a heads up that this grant was open, and I went and checked it out. So my first impression of Monster Care Squad, not knowing anything about it, but seeing like, oh, maybe this grant program is something I can hop into, was that there was this like gorgeous world where you had these monsters of all different varieties that were in pain, that were infected with this unknown parasite of a sort. And you went around with your friends helping them, trying to heal them. It was like, you're the mouse going around pulling the thorn out of the heel of the lion kind of thing. And I was instantly in on that. I was just like, oh, I know exactly where I'm in on this, and like how the the curse that afflicts things manifests in different ways, and so I applied to the grant with an idea that just like instantly, as soon as I read the setting, instantly popped in my head for this huge turtle like creature, a hairy turtle-like creature that had essentially a volcano erupting out of its shell. It lived on top of this mountain, and I just thought, what a interesting idea for a game, in contrast to what I had been used to with D&D, to go and you encounter something of this magnitude, of this sort of like an intimidating kind of creature like this, and instead of approaching with sword drawn, like approach with a hand out, and trying to empathize with. And I just I don't know, I was hooked on that, and I got the grant to do it, and that was kind of my end to the co-op at that point.
Fabulous. Well, I think the theme really resonated with a lot of people. Like you say, did fantastically well on Kickstarter. And, for me, when I was reading about it, it's something so different. Like, for example, last week we had Lancer, people from Lancer on, which is great. I mean, that's a game about being big mechs and smashing things. We love doing that. But I think sometimes, like, it's so great to have variety and something different. And this game, there's not, am I correct? There's not like combat rules. There's not a system for like having weapons and fighting things.
Yeah, instead of things like a health bar, the process of curing the monster is partially a race against time, using some clock mechanics, and then in the final moments when you have the cure, it becomes this kind of tug of war where you're using the resources that you've gathered in your investigation phases leading up to it. And it's just a matter of administering the cure, and it's still a big
Yeah, so then I said I often say there is combat and violence, but it's in a pacifist approach to both of those things. So
yeah, what I really love about Monster Care Squad is I've played in a lot of games where and I love these players where they are agents of chaos, and they will maybe kill a key NPC to your campaign that you're in, like right out the door. And then the GM is like, well, what do I do now? And I appreciate that I like improv a lot. I like, I spend hours making a campaign. So when somebody foils my plans, I really appreciate that, for making me stay true to the medium. But Monster Care Squad doesn't have those things built in that same way, where if you are an agent of chaos, you have to work a little bit harder for it, because you can't just be like, I'm going to roll and I'm going to shoot this NPC, because there isn't any move for that. There isn't a way to like engage directly in combat like that. So in theory, you could, and people have made violent versions of this game, violent expansions. You could do these things, and that's great. But because we didn't put it in there, it kind of sets that tone a little bit more to be like, yes, technically you can roll in somewhere and you can just wipe someone out if you want, but we're trying to be part of these communities. We're trying to be a boon to them. And I really appreciate that. As a pacifist myself, it was probably the main, and maybe even the reason why I got invited on the project. I'm not exactly sure, but maybe that was it.
Maybe that was a selling point for it. So let's talk about the system kind of a little bit. Should we start with kind of the 3 phases of play, or talk about characters? Where do you think would make sense to talk about the game a bit more?
Sure. I'd be happy to talk a little about the phases of play.
Yeah, sure, Gabriel, jump into the phases for sure.
Yeah. So my understanding, there's 3 kind of three key phases, which is diagnosis, synthesis, and symbiosis. And as a dyslexic person, reading and saying those, 10 out of 10. But yeah, Gabriel, could you talk us through those phases?
Sure. So in the diagnosis phase, this is very much the detective portion of the game, right? Ideally, each adventure, you're heading to a new place, you're discovering a new village, and you are trying to assess what's wrong with the monster, and you're sort of seeing the scene. before you. And yeah, even though it's a pacifist game, it's not peaceful, right? These are huge monsters, and they have huge effects on the land around them. So you could come to a village and you could find that it's been scoured with flames. Whole bits of trees have been burned down, and houses. You could find that there's just sort of viscous, gigantic monster snot that is planting people in place, and they can't move and they don't know what to do. But you're trying to figure out from the local community, you're ingratiating yourself with them every time, asking them questions, using your powers of observation, and using the character you built with skills that you get to determine yourself to figure out exactly what's going wrong. And through this, in the second phase of play, you are building up the resources that will eventually go into curing the monster in the final phase.
Okay, so that's sorry. I'll let you. You had a flow of thought there. I'll let you carry on.
No, it's all right. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, so that sounds like the diagnosis phase is going in, meeting the community, figuring out kind of what's going on. And this also sounds like it's as well as the game phases, this is the structure of like an adventure. So this is kind of almost like game master advice and things like that. Would that be right?
Yeah, I would say so. It's the mechanics are slightly different, especially between the first, second, and third phases. But I think yeah, I really have no problem with people scavenging, because I will certainly do it from other books, whether it's a system agnostic sort of adventure guide or not, I might it might be fun to take elements of this and try to run them with a Blades in the Dark hack or something like that. So I don't take umbrage with people stealing sort of the story formula and using another system for it.
Yeah, but if we're playing this as intended, as in, playing Monster Care Squad, so we've gone through the diagnosis phase, we've gone into the town, we've been exploring using our various skills in the character. What happens in the synthesis phase that's different?
So you now know what's wrong with the monster. The disease that's ravaged them, called the false gold, has given them a terrible cold, and that's why they're sneezing horrible snot or fire over the village and tearing everything down. Now you have to create a cure. And the creative thing here is it doesn't just have to be investigating to find a poultice or a potion or anything like that. The cure could be a song. The cure could be bringing together two monsters that have fallen out and caused the monster incredible heartbreak. You can get poetic with it. I hope if there's a game that can lend itself to some poetry when it comes to sicknesses and cures, it can be this one. So if you're thinking about Spirited Away, which is a big influence, there are things that are bothering the creatures that our hero helps in Spirited Away that are so much more than just being ill. There could be a curse because of a grudge with another person. It could be a broken heart. And speaking of Spirited Away, that's kind of when I think about the symbiosis phase of play, the final phase, I think very much about that incredible scene in which Chihiro is trying to get the cure into Haku's mouth when he's in his full draconic form. Apparently, or dragon form, draconic. This is not D&D. This is not
it's
D&D.
not. It's not.
But Miyazaki even instructed his animators to go to a vet and watch how difficult it is to give a dog medicine as influence for that animation. And that's where the sort of push and pull of the final phase of play comes in. It's about pressing an advantage or being pushed back into a retreat, because these animals are very large and powerful, but they're not actively trying to murder our heroes. They just are going through the incredible throes of this sickness and are indefatigable in their desire not to be touched, as all of us have probably felt from time to time, getting sick. So you've been building up through these first few phases of play, ideally, this reservoir of resources that you can then use rolling to press your advantage against the monster. And once you're in position, just like Chihiro trying to jam her hand into that dragon's mouth, you can administer the cure.
I love the metaphor you said about being at the vets, because I think we've all like maybe taken a cat to the vets or something, and even though you're trying to help the cat doesn't want to be here, doesn't want to be part of this, and we'll let you know about it. Yeah, and we'll let you know they're displeased. So I think that's a great metaphor for it. Talking about some of the in the game, we've got mechanically like clocks, moves, and control tracks. Could you talk a little bit about how those fit in? So what that would look like when we're playing?
Sure. So the moves can be used for the final phase of play, but they're mainly going to be used for the first two to determine your roles. You have move sets that are specific to each phase. So during diagnosis phase, you can pull a thread. So that's proper detective work where you ask around for information, and you roll using your skills, and then a little bit like Powered by the Apocalypse, you pick a result from that move based on the roll. And each of those rolls is going to move a clock forward for the diagnosis phase. And when the clock is complete, you move to synthesis.
Fantastic. That all makes sense. It sounds like there's not so much going on that it's not too scary for new kind of players. I don't know, Jan, would you agree this is a good game to sit and play with people that are kind of new to role-playing games?
Was that JN or Jan?
Oh, I said either. I said JN, but either one of you can answer.
Yeah, I think it's great to hop in with, because that's sort of like the way things build into each other. It's all very just like right there on the page, not like multiple indexes you're going to have to flip through to get to, like things are you can come up with solutions in a non-linear way, but the mechanics of how you play the game have a linear framework that are easy to follow and easy to find in the book. So yeah, I think it's great for introducing new players too.
Fantastic. And we've been talking a lot about the world and the setting. I do want to talk a lot about the monsters, because this is what this game is about. I think this is what drew people in. They're like, yeah, I want to, Jan, like you were saying, I want to go pet some cool monsters and things. So Jan, could you talk us through the different monsters and sort of creatures we're going to encounter in the game, what they're like?
Like there's a lot of them. We all have our favorites. I made one. I know Gabe made 3.
Yep.
But I think everyone can agree Capernai is the favorite.
Oh yeah.
Maybe.
Tell me about them.
Capernai is very cool. I'm not even sure why everyone loves Capernai, but they seem to be the one that I see on Twitter all the time. I don't know if you happen to have an image of them handy, but they're extremely cute. They're kind of, I don't know, I think of them kind of, yeah, there you go. There's the one. It's kind of, for me, Capernai kind of has, even though this is not canonical in any way, you won't see this in the book, kind of gives me like Eeyore vibes, just the way they physically look. They're just kind of slow lumbering around, and I don't know, personally I think everybody loves that. Like everyone loves a cow, you see a dopey cow and they're just like, yo, what's up, I'm just a cow, I'm just chilling, I'm not aggressive, it's cool. And that's kind of Capernai to me. I think that's why everybody loves Capernai. They're almost like the himbo of the universe, even though I don't presume to guess their gender. It's kind of the energy they carry. But all the monsters are really different from each other. I think that's my favorite part about the monsters. And they're very like, not to like toot our horn too much, but they're quite original as far as how they interact with the world. Like I don't know if you've read them all, but there's one called Hatto. I couldn't even begin to explain what Hatto is because
does it involve hats?
No
Okay.
hats whatsoever. But there's every other game I've played, for the most part, they have monsters, and you're like, it's kind of like this from this game, or it's kind of like this from this movie. But Hatto is just like, I don't even know. It's a kind of maybe some ribbons. It kind of looks like ribbons in the air, sort of, with a big eye and a bulb kind of thing. And yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how Leafy managed to draw this thing based on Nem's description, but it happened.
Fantastic. So weird and wonderful creatures coming in there. Does anyone else have any favorites they kind of want to shout out whilst we're here talking about the monsters? Oh, Gabriel, you're muted, so I'll unmute you.
Oh.
I think you need to unmute yourself, Gabriel, because we do want to hear what you're saying. Just in the bottom. There we go.
Wanted to say about Hatto, if anyone ever wanted to be friends with the monster from Nope, you can do that. It's a little bit what Hatto reminds me of. And then I wrote a monster called Cola Cola, whose identity is up to some debate.
Okay.
Suddenly, the rats of one of Ald-Amura's largest cities, Tenaris Mall, are united under a sort of revolutionary leader, but no one knows which rat that is specifically. But suddenly the rats are able to organize as a 1.5 million rat revolutionary force, demanding meat and cheese of the city, demanding open windows. And is Cola Cola one of them? Is Cola Cola all of them? Is Cola Cola a specific rat person in particular, or just an idea? You don't get to know that, but from now on, there are regularly posted letters from the conglomerate of the 1.5 million rats demanding access to meats and cheeses, open windows, the name and address of the health inspector, these sorts of things. And if those needs aren't met, well, that's 1.5 million rats. What can you do?
I don't know what I would do about that. I'm anxious every time I go to New York because of that issue, because I know they're there. I hope they never get organized in that way that you just mentioned.
Right.
Okay.
If they unified, New York is in big trouble. That rat czar wouldn't know what hit her if the rats unified in New York.
Colo Colo is my favorite monster.
Yeah. Amazing. So we have some amazing monsters in the world that we've talked through, and there's so many to explore, but we haven't yet talked about who the players will be playing, so who these monster care specialists are. So JN, could you give us an overview of the characters people play in these games?
I think I might bounce this one over to Jan if you don't.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the character creation process in this is, I think, quite simple. I've got a little post-it note with the 4 things here you basically do. So you've got 4 trainings. I've made myself a little sample character here. Nice. My trainings are, and so I love the way our characters are built. They're super cool. They're it completely ditches the idea of like a class-based system. Instead, you just have a list of general moves, and then your background and your specialties and basically your cool equipment that you have. And we have 5 stats. They're force, fine, grit, acuity, and allure. And those tie into your trainings and your background. So as an example, I took 4 trainings. I built myself. I took fine artist. I attached that to the stat fine. Then I took musician and I attached that to grit. And then gardening, attached that to acuity. and then poet, and I attach that to allure. And so what these do is these inform your character and the kinds of things you might be doing in your, in the world that you can do easily. They don't have to be like this. They can be, you can be a climber or a wrestler or anything you want. We don't prescribe anything. These you can come up with your own. There are some examples in the book, but you can just put whatever you want, basically. And these tie into your background is similar. You can think of trainings and backgrounds kind of not exactly the same, but they can inform each other. Okay. And then they kind of feed into your, well, they don't have to, but they can feed into your special equipment or your special item. This is something that only you have. It's a really, for me, I wrote hand drum, and it's what my character would use to, do their poetry along to, let's say. And then you've got a couple of moves and then specialties. Your specialties are kind of what makes you stand out. So I put booming voice and internal clock. So for me, what that means in the game mechanically is booming voice is, let's say we're in a foggy area. I may be able to lead my crew to safety using my loud voice, making it easy for them to follow through the obscured visage. And then internal clock, I always know what time of day it is, because it doesn't matter what time it is. I can keep track of the time. So these are little things that you can see how those could be made useful in a game, but they're not generally going to be, you're not going to have a lot of people being like, no, I wanted a loud voice. It's going to be easy to differentiate and let everybody have a little bit of fun. And then you've got moves. So we talked a little bit about the moves and the phases of play. Those are specific to those phases. But there's also a list of moves that is just for use anytime in the game. And you take 2 of these right at the start. And these kind of give you a little flavor. I took Companion Rat, which gives me a little rat friend that's basically always hanging around with me and can find me. I just like rats and things like that. So
just one, not 1.5 million, sure.
No, not yet. Working up to that.
Okay.
And then I took Crikey, which is a little ode to Steve Irwin, bless his soul. And it basically just means you've always been fascinated by monsters, and it gives you like a little bit of it's very similar to what it would be like in real life. If you've ever known somebody that just loves animals, they're almost always really good with animals. And that's kind of what those kinds of moves do. They give you a little bit, I'm saying, mechanical tie into the world. But I wanted to just say real quick, what I feel like for me is really special about Monster Care Squad is we mention it several times in the book. All of these things are kind of just suggestions for you. And if you don't like them, then just do whatever you want. This is like a framework. And in fact, we say like, here's what we think the false gold is. What do you think it is? Like, it's up to you to really feel. It's almost like a Mad Lib sort of that isn't advertised that way.
Yeah, and I think along with that sort of like being able to make your own thing, the book lays out suggestions for like good and bad examples of what kind of specialties you might have, or like how you can build a move, so that if you don't find something to pick out that inspires you or you feel like is a fit, you're not just left, with a blank page and no guidance on how to make something up.
Sure.
There's that framework there that helps you come up with those things.
Fantastic. And can we talk a little bit about monster gifts as well? Because I love how mechanically in the game, obviously in the story this would happen, but also mechanically the way players interact with monsters will have an impact on their characters from a story and in a mechanical way. So tell us about monster gifts.
Monster gifts are really cool. They actually tie into the moves. Every move in the game has a enhanced version to it. I'll just use the first one on the list as a great example. It seems to be a world favorite skill. I think because of the utility, it's called Pack Rat. Basically, you take the skill and you just always have that thing that you need in your pack when it comes up. And then
Useful.
you can get that upgraded with a monster gift, and then it turns to a special gift. And then it's something special from that monster you cured, and whenever you need it, you have it. Now, this is still going back to what I said earlier about how you can feel free to make the world yours. That gift isn't named. We're not saying the special gift was the horn of something or other.
Sure.
You get to pick that. You get, you know, that's your power in the game. And that's kind of all, every monster gift does that. And a lot of them also have really cool extra features, like they'll give you, you know, physical characteristics. I had we did an expansion called Behind the Waterfall, and I created a monster in there who has basically a crown that kind of light over their head, and when you get a monster gift from them, you get that same light crown essentially. So all kinds of that very, very anime friendly stuff. You know, everybody wants to have those cute little features on themselves. You know, I would like some little bat ears on my ankles for some bat wings on my ankles for some reason. You could get that in this game because you save a bat creature of some kind, they might give you that.
Nice. I love that. I thought that was a really nice, fun element of the game as well. And if you're playing a campaign, like your character slowly over time will have all these elements of their journey and their story on them. So I thought that was really nice. I wanted to bring that out. We are getting closer to the kind of the top of the hour, so drawing near the end. So if you are watching live and you have any questions, now is the time to kind of bring them in. But do we have any kind of elements about the game that you want to talk about, or any questions I haven't asked you and things you wanted to shout about the game? Now would be the time.
So I just picked up Just a Car by Nevin Holmes, who you had earlier, to talk about the game. You're in space and everything's fucked. And I am so excited to jump into this one because it's very much about the romanticized versions of the courtroom experience, sort of like a classic courtroom drama, or like Phoenix Wright. I can't wait to dig into this.
Oh, okay, so that's your kind of brag for a TTRPG you're loving right now that you want to shout out, Jessica. Amazing, because we obviously talked a lot about Monster Care Squad. If you are watching and you are interested in Monster Care Squad and you do want to pick up a copy, there are links in the show notes and up on the screen now, because the best way to support indie tabletop RPG creators is to buy their stuff. So if you've been interested and inspired by this conversation, please do go and pick that up there and support it. But yes, talking about other TTRPGs that we're liking and enjoying at the moment, Jan, do you have a recommendation for a TTRPG that is not Monster Care Squad and is not D&D?
Actually, I'm gonna suggest the one that really got me into making my own games, releasing them under my own name without a team or anything like that. It's called Plot Armor by Ryan D. Black. It's a solo game. It's a journaling game.
Love that.
And it's about basically how anime protagonists have plot armor. You have, you know, up until your predetermined death, you have complete immunity to anything that could happen. Even if you do die, you're coming back somehow. So and that game just really made me realize there is a market for niche games beyond what the industry kind of calls a niche game. The mainstream industry calls a niche game like Dungeons and Dragons, where everybody is a goblin only. Goblins only D&D.
How
That's
wacky.
not really niche, you know, that's just like, it's still exactly D&D. It's just now everybody's goblins. That's not niche at all. And then, but a game where you're writing, nobody else is playing, like, it's just, I don't know, it really opened my eyes to how ideas can really be made into something fun that you wouldn't consider before.
Fantastic.
That's,
so
that's my goal.
Plot Armor, that one. Okay, I'll check that out. I've just started exploring solo TTRPGs, so this is my new kind of thing. So I am digging into a lot of those, which is really, really great. So thank you for that. JN, do you have any TTRPGs you want to give a shout out to?
Sure. So I also happen to be thinking of a solo game.
Perfect.
So I've been really enjoying Chalice from Monkey's Paw Games and Newer Rose. It's just from an aesthetic point of view, a beautiful book. But it's a solo journaling game where you use a deck of tarot cards as your sort of mechanic through the game to go on an Arthurian journey as a knight. And it really kind of scratched my itch for coming up with living in a story like The Green Knight after I had watched that movie and have some fun in that kind of world. So I've enjoyed that a lot.
I love the sound of it. I've actually heard of that and heard really good things. So you're the second person that's recommended that to me now. So I think it's a sign that I need to go pick it up. But yes, thank you so much for those 3 great recommendations. And also thank you so much for giving up your time to come and talk to me about your game, Monster Care Squad. Such a fantastic looking game. Like I said before, if you're at all interested, please do go pick it up and check it out. So it's available now, so you can go get yourself a copy there. I think that brings us to the end of our time this week. So thank you again, all 3 of you, for coming on to talk and share this game with us. And thank you to everyone that came along to listen and get involved in the chat as well. If you are free next Monday, we have another great guest coming on. We're talking about Raccoon Sky Pirates, so another gear shift there. So you can make sure you can come back there. But yeah, I think that's all we have for this week. That we'll sign off and say goodbye. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course, anytime. Welcome back anytime to talk about any of your other games as well, because obviously there's more exciting stuff coming along too. All right.
Wonderful.
Thanks very much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.